Good afternoon, fellow Birmingham City Schools colleagues. Welcome to the Marzano Focused Teacher Evaluation Model Training, creating learning targets and performance skills. Because of the COVID-19 outbreak, your teacher leaders were unable to deliver this PD to you in the form of a turnaround on March 16th, 2020. So you will receive that training in a virtual capacity today instead. So let's get started. My name is Sandra Marshall Pickens, and I am the Teacher Evaluation Implementation Specialist, or TEIS for short, for Network 2. Presenting alongside me today are my colleagues, the new kid on the block, Dr. Elizabeth Childs, who is the TEIS for Network 1, and James Ekendayo, TEIS for Network 3. Everything that we do here in Birmingham City Schools connects to our district priorities. The priority that we will focus on today is priority 3. So let's take a look at that. Today, we will engage in professional learning that will lead to improvements in instruction in every classroom. Our norms for today are simple. Please take care of yourself, especially in light of everything that's happening in our society today with COVID-19. Our next norm is what is learned here leaves here. That's right. We want you to take this information back to your classroom and have a true impact on instruction. And finally, be present. We understand that we're working in a virtual capacity, but we want everyone to be present and participating in a productive manner. In today's session, you will learn about and understand the various components of a performance scale, including the learning targets. We will learn about the importance of declarative versus procedural knowledge and standards. And we will learn about the 3 different types of targets that come together to create a performance scale. As we are proceeding through the presentation, we will also stop to perform comprehension checks to ensure that we are mastering and understanding the content. So the very first thing that we must do before we can write a performance scale or a learning target is to unpack our standard. So let's begin the process of unpacking our standard. I like this quote. It reads, "The teacher must be clear about what students are to learn, not just about what students are to do." This quote speaks volumes because as teachers, we know that we must be clear and deliberate about what our students are to learn. And writing clear learning targets and performance skills can help us add a layer of intentionality to our planning. Learning targets are, in essence, the essential knowledge and skills that students must master from the standards. Your essential knowledge is called the declarative knowledge, or the vocabulary and nouns of the standard. Your essential skills are called procedural knowledge, or the processes and verbs of the standard. With declarative knowledge, students must have multiple exposures to vocabulary. This not only helps them deepen their understanding of the vocabulary, but it also helps them retain the meaning of the vocabulary that is presented to them from the content. With procedural knowledge, teachers must model, provide feedback, and give students opportunities to practice so that students can process the content. This knowledge will lead to increases in fluency. And just a quick reminder, the declarative knowledge is the what of a standard, it is what students are to learn. And the procedural knowledge is the how of a standard. It is how students are to learn the information that is presented to them. Let's take a moment to look at our example standard. In our example standard, you will see that the declarative knowledge has been underlined. What do you think I am going to underline as my declarative knowledge? Very good. My declarative knowledge is characters, settings, and major events. This knowledge serves as the vocabulary that is imperative or important for a student to learn from the standard. Using the same standard, we're going to now identify the procedural knowledge. In this example standard, you will see that the procedural knowledge has been circled. What do you think I am going to circle? Very good. Your procedural knowledge is identifying. Your procedural knowledge tells the process of what students need to learn. Let's take a moment to review over everything that we have learned thus far. We have learned that learning targets are the essential knowledge and skills of a standard. We have learned that the declarative knowledge or the vocabulary that students should be learning from a particular standard can be identified by locating the nouns of a standard. We have also learned that the procedural knowledge or the processes that students should be performing from a particular standard can be located by identifying the verbs of a standard. So again, we have our declarative knowledge, which is the what of a standard, and our procedural knowledge, which will tell us the how of a particular standard. Now, whether you are viewing this presentation individually, with a partner, or with a group, or even with a group of colleagues from your school, we ask that you will pause the screen at this time. You will need handout number 1. You will take handout number 1 and you will identify the declarative and the procedural knowledge of a standard of your choosing. If you are working with others, we ask that you discuss the work that you did on your standard. You will use this standard for the duration of this presentation. Have a great work session.
Welcome back, and I'm Dr. Childs, and I'm with Network One. I'm going to walk you through learning targets, more specifically, creating the learning goal targets. We're going to dive deeper into creating these goals. For this section, remember to have handout number 1 available. There are 3 different types of learning targets: your learning goal target, or your 3.0, your foundational learning target, or your 2.0, and cognitively complex learning target, or your 4.0. For this section, we'll focus on learning goal targets, or your level 3.0 on your performance scale. The performance scale we will discuss further in this training, along with some other common language of the Marzano evaluation system. Learning goal targets, or your 3.0. The knowledge and skills students need to demonstrate in order to master a standard. They tell what students should know and be able to do by the end of the course or the grade level. Remember, your learning goal target is your actual standard, which should be written in standard language. This is where your students should be. The goal is to make sure students are striving for this level. Standards should always be in grade level and current. Earlier, I mentioned the word scale. A performance scale. This is a continuum of distinct levels of knowledge and skills related to a specific standard. Performance scales organizes the various types of targets on the continuum that ranges from simpler to more complex thinking. A performance scale functions as a communication tool between you and your students as it outlines the progression of their learning toward the learning goal or the standard. In other words, a scale is simply a tool used to measure the learning towards a desired goal or, of course, the standard. This is an example of a performance scale. Notice at level 3.0, there's a bullseye. Yes, you guessed it. That bullseye is there because that's our target. That is our standard. And remember, your standard is written in standard language. So again, your level 3.0 should be your grade-specific standard. Students will be able to. They'll be able to analyze the author, develops the contrast, the points of the view, different characters in the text, and analyze how an author distinguishes his or her point of view of purpose in the text from the others. So again, that 3.0 is very important because the 3.0 is the actual standard, and it should be written in standard language. Step 1, or identifying the declarative and procedural knowledge of the standard. We're going to review this for a moment. As Sandra stated previously, you want to make sure that you are unpacking the standard and identifying the declarative and procedural knowledge of the standard. Take a look at the standard. This is the kindergarten ELA standard. The word identify is the procedure or the how. The characters, settings, and major events, which is underlined, is the declarative or the what. So far, we have reviewed declarative knowledge and procedural knowledge. Take a moment to rate yourself. So far, we have reviewed unpacking the standard and identifying both the declarative and procedural knowledge of the standard. At the bottom of this slide, you will see a blue arrow with unsatisfactory, partially proficient, proficient, and advanced. Before we move on, rate on where you believe you are. Unsatisfactory meaning, I don't have a clue about what's going on. Partially proficient, I know just a little bit. I can remember some of the language, but I still need a little bit of help. Proficient means I got this. And advanced means I got this and I can help teach others. Great job. Check. Okay, let's move on. Step 2, chunk the standard. Going back to the learning goal target or your 3.0, remember that your 3.0 is your actual standard. Your standards that should be written in standard language. This is what we discussed previously. And remember, this is where your students should be. Now, let's take a look at an example of a learning goal target. Notice that the standard is written in standard language. Underneath are your learning goal targets or your I can statements. Notice that this reflects an unpacked standard. This is where your prior knowledge of procedural and declarative knowledge will come into play. Remember, when you're writing your level 3 or your 3.0, it is written in standard language and it is your actual standard. Your learning goal targets are small little targets that's going to get you to your actual standard. So if you take a look at what your students should be able to do, or your I can statements, it breaks or unpacks or chunks the actual standard, which is to identify characters in the story, identify the settings in the story, and identify the major events in the story. When in doubt, make sure that you're reviewing your procedural and your declarative knowledge to help you unpack the standard to be able to create your learning goal targets. Okay, you guys have come a long way. Let's practice what you have learned so far. Now you are going to pause your screen and you're going to take out handout number 2. On your own or with your thought partner, choose a standard from handout 1 or choose a content level standard that is not listed to work with. If you need assistance, remember you can always rewind to the previous slides.
It's time for us to stop and see where we are at with our learning. So let's do a quick comprehension check. At the bottom of the screen, you will see a blue arrow that you will use to rate where you are at on your learning journey. Are you at unsatisfactory? Meaning you're just not getting it. You don't understand the content that is being presented to you today. Are you at partially proficient? Meaning you're kind of getting it, but you still have a ways to go. Or are you at proficient? Meaning you are learning it, you are understanding it, you are at a good place with your learning. Or are you at advanced? Meaning not only have you learned the information, but you have learned the content so well that you can teach it to another person. Okay, so our learning goals, or our learning targets, shall I say, for today's session were to learn and understand the varying components of learning targets and performance skills, including declarative knowledge, procedural knowledge, and learning goal knowledge. And I do believe that we are on track to hitting our targets for today. Great work so far, guys. Give yourselves a pat on the back. Elizabeth covered the first 2 steps needed to create learning targets. The first step was to identify the declarative and the procedural knowledge. I covered that with you as well. The second step was to chunk the standard. And the third step, now that we will work on today, is unpacking the foundational learning target, or the level 2.0 target. Foundational learning targets, or targets at the level 2.0, are the information students need to understand before they can move up to learning goal targets. They are the prerequisites that students need to master to ultimately achieve the learning goal targets. Now that we've talked about what foundational learning targets are, let's talk for a moment about what foundational learning goal targets are not. Foundational learning targets are not based on previous grade level standards. They should always be based on current grade level standards. When we are thinking about your foundational learning targets, we must always go back to our declarative and procedural knowledge. What is the academic vocabulary that we want students to learn? What are the basic skills and processes that students must know and be able to perform when it comes to mastering a standard? Your foundational learning target or your level 2.0 target will always be one level down from your learning goal target. So if your learning goal target is at the comprehension level, then your foundational learning target will be at the retrieval level. This template is a template that you can use to assist you as you begin writing your foundational learning targets or your level 2.0 targets. The templates that we have provided for you will show you how to unpack your standards to write those learning targets. These templates will be helpful for you until you are comfortable writing the targets on your own. Think of them as a scaffold. They will provide support for you until you are good enough to write these targets on your own with no assistance. Now, at the top of the template, you will notice the standard. Why, you may ask? Because we always work with our standard in mind. Next, at the bottom left corner of our template, you will see the foundational knowledge. The foundational knowledge, again, is simply the vocabulary that students should learn. Again, this is your declarative knowledge. At the bottom right side of your template, you will find your foundational processes. And your foundational processes will show you the foundational level of the task that students should be able to perform. Again, your foundational processes will serve as your procedural knowledge. Remember, when you are working with your foundational learning targets or your 2.0 targets, you will be working one level below the learning goal target or the level 3.0 target. So you will be using a template that looks like this in your next activity. Again, I just want to reiterate that as you get comfortable writing your foundational learning targets, you're not going to need to rely on these templates. These templates just serve as a way to support you until you can write these targets with ease on your own. At this point, we would like for you to pause your screen and take out handout number 3. You will use handout number 3 in your next work session. You will use this template to unpack your standard so that you can write a foundational learning target. Remember, whether you are working with a partner, working with a group, or working with a team of colleagues from your school, we ask that you discuss the information that you have written on your template and share it with your group. That way, we can all increase our learning. Have a great work session.
Let's stop to monitor and check our learning. At the bottom of this slide, you will see a blue arrow with unsatisfactory, partially proficient, proficient, and advanced. Before we move on, rate yourself on where you believe you are. Good job. And now we will continue. This slide. Now let's shift our attention to creating cognitively complex targets. Ms. Pickens and Dr. Charles have covered the learning goal target, which is your level 3 target, and foundational goal target, which is your level 2 target. The learning goal target, which is level 3, is the grade level standard that your students should be striving for. Extend student thinking and make applications beyond what is set forth in the standard. Students think about the same content in more complex ways. Unfortunately, many of your students may not get to this level. Students who are at this level are students who have mastered the learning goal target and can demonstrate their knowledge in helping other students reach their learning target. These students can also think about the same content in more complex and creative ways by testing hypotheses and making predictions based on their experiences. The next slide illustrates the difference between two reading targets. As previously mentioned, the learning target is the grade level standard, which is level 3. The rating standard on this slide asks students, with prompting and support, to identify characters, settings, and major events in a story, which is a foundational learning target. On the other hand, the cognitively complex target of the same standard asks students to compare and contrast key details of a story, including characters, settings, and major events. As we move along, now let's take a moment to study the next slide, which addresses Mazzano's taxonomy's level of cognitive complexity. Pay close attention to the action words used at level 1 of the taxonomy, which is retrieval. Level 2, which is comprehension. Level 3, which is analysis. And level 4, which is knowledge utilization. The words used at each level should guide your process when writing your standard. In comparing Webb's DOK with Mazzano's taxonomy, identify similarities and differences. This crosswalk allows you to reference the Mazzano common language with what you know with Webb's DOK. This next slide shows you an example of a performance scale with a bullseye on level 3, which, remember, we said your students should be, striving for. The bullseye, which is level 3.0, if you pay close attention to it, tells you what students will be able to do, which is analyzing the author, how the author develops and contrasts the points of view of different characters and how an author distinguishes his or her point of view or purpose in a text from that of others. Now, If we are talking about cognitively complex target, then you look at 4.0. Also look at what students will be able to do. And in this case, they have to modify a text so it is written through a different character's point of view. We have to make sure that we are using the right action word when writing the targets for these standards. In the scale, that it will be best practice to begin with the standard at level 3. You can then proceed to build down to level 2, which is your foundational. That is below the standard. And then end with level 4, a step above, which is the cognitive complex target that we have been discussing so far.
Please feel free to reach out to your TEIS for your particular network if you need additional support. Again, your TEIS for Network 1 is Dr. Elizabeth Childs. Your TEIS for Network 2 is myself, Sandra Marshall Pickens. And your Network 3 TEIS is James Ekendayo. This is just a quick announcement. If you have not registered for today's professional development, we would like for you to take a moment to do that now. The title of the course that you can find in PowerSchool is Creating Learning Targets and Performance Skills. The course registration number is 248995. And just a reminder, you will have to take a survey that is located in PowerSchool before you can be awarded credit for today's PD. We would also like for you guys to take a moment to please complete your exit slip. Your exit slip is a 3-2-1. So on your exit slip, you would tell us 3 things that you learned today, 2 things that served as aha moments for you, and 1 lingering question that you may still have. You can access your exit slip by either taking a picture of the QR code, or for those of you who have QR code readers, you can use your QR code reader to access the exit slip. Now, for those of you who don't have access to either one of those things, you can use the address at the bottom of the screen to access the 321. Now, just a quick note, when you access your 321, we do have a space for you to write your name and select the school that you are located at. This is how we will determine who actually participated in today's PD session. These are the references that I used in preparing today's PD session. On behalf of the Department of Educator Effectiveness, we would like to thank you for engaging in professional learning with us today. As aforementioned, everything that we do here in Birmingham City Schools connects to our district priorities. The priority that we focused on today was priority 3. And I think that we can all agree that indeed we engaged in professional learning that will lead to improvements in instruction in every classroom. Thank you.